Hello everyone, I'm Setayesh, and this is the fourth episode of the series Literary Schools in 15 Minutes. The aim of this series is to help introduce the essence and core concepts of each literary movement to students of literature. Today's topic is symbolism, a school of thought, a literary movement which was contemporary to the realist and naturalist movements. Symbolism means representing things by symbols, to see through the material world with our inner eye and find the meanings behind them. A critic called Gustav Kahn once said that the aim of symbolist artists is to externalize ideas, or to give the abstract and the intangible a body, a physical representation in the material world, which would be what we see, or in the case of literature, what we read, actually. About its history, this movement started around 1850s and lasted till the end of the century, 1900. A time when science and rationality had preeminence over faith, and the materialistic view of world and mankind had paralyzed human will. We know that around the beginning of this movement, Charles Darwin had published his revolutionary work, The Origin of Species, and toward the end of the century, there was the theories of thinkers such as Nietzsche and Freud, crumbling all the certainties known to mankind. We also know how these works and men affected the man's perception of himself and his perception of God. The symbolist movement is actually one of the pillars of the bridge, which eventually led to modernism, to the birth of modernism. Now, the other pillars be realism and naturalism, and some other small variants, which I will address later in the presentation. But the most important ones are the trio of realism and naturalism and symbolism. So, in a cruel and rational world, writers and artists sought something of a more abstract nature, something that was not tangible and materialistic as everything else. They needed visions, they needed dreams. They were against the pessimism of their realist and naturalist contemporaries, and of course their modernist successors. Symbolists wished to make humans and human life, at least in poetry, mysterious and ambiguous again, as it was before the flourish of science and rationality. They were uh, the worshippers of the magical past and not the real present. Their goal was to create art that would convey the poet's inner dream. Much like the Romantics, I'd like to call the Symbolists poetic folks, but I mean, that's just the term I like to use for them. Uh, the origins. Symbolism began in France and spread to a number of countries. In Russia, it was influential enough to become a dominant movement for some time, but not influential enough in the other countries. And the other countries were all European countries, by the way. Uh, but the movement is mostly a French movement, and yeah, Another point to note is that poetry constitutes the major part of symbolist literature. Not novels, not plays, but poetry and French poetry for the most part. The themes, the inner life of the individual. Symbolist poets were concerned with expressing the internal life of the individual. They focused on subjective mental expression, internal moods, emotional states, and spiritual sentiments in reaction against 19th century's focus on the objective, the external, and the concrete realities. They missed the mysticism that that element of imagination in art. I've already talked about it so much, I don't want to bore you. Um, Symbolist use of imagery shows the state of mind, imagination, human psyche, and dreams, all abstract and subjective, actually context. Subjective meaning they differ for each individual and are not a definite or absolute because they're different for each individual. The journey motif is a metaphor for internal explorations into the individual's consciousness, quests into imagination, and in search of meaning. You see, um, the literature is in an abstract it is an abstract imaginary setting instead of the real physical world, exactly the opposite of realist and naturalist literature. Religion and spirituality. Some symbolist writers explored the traditional concept of sin and Satanism, while some others, in particular two homosexual French poets, harshly criticized traditional religious beliefs in which homosexuality was a sin. So, of course, they would criticize it. I mean, they were homosexuals. Um, okay, urban life as symbolism is immediately succeeded by modernism, which means it is a sort of a bridge to modernism, having some of its characteristics, such as depictions of urban landscapes and filth, and evoked feelings of alienation by living in modern cities. And here I want to mention that when we talk about urban landscapes, try to picture like 19th or early 20th century landscape, okay? Not 21st century like cities and landscape, because I mean in that time the cities were just growing to uh, become bigger, and there were like a lot of factories, a lot of places that were, I mean, the work conditions were so bad everywhere, was just so filthy. There was not the garbage man who would just come and pick up the garbage from in front of people's houses. So or someone to, I don't know, to clean up the city. Okay, it was just, the city was a new thing, and big cities were new things. So when you picture an in 19th century urban landscape, you picture a filthy, full of smoke and smog, like city with brown and gray colors, and so it was pretty gloomy and bleak. Actually, this last theme, the urban life, is the least noticeable in this kind of literature, but it is still there, so we have to mention it. Styles. The frequently used style in symbolist poetry is free verse, free from the strictness of traditional French poetry, such as meter and rhyme. They valued the content of the poem over its form, which is fair, I think, my personal opinion. So the form wasn't that important to them. This influenced the later modern poetry of the 20th century. I'm sorry, in which traditional forms were nothing but mere jokes to them. So that's it. About the mood, they tried to evoke moods such as longing, regret, loss, and reverie or fancy through the use of language, as if they are grieving for the lost past or mourning for the lost past. In symbolist fiction and drama, plot is less important than the overall mood or the atmosphere that is created. Uh, Atmosphere is so important. It should be, magical and mystic for the symbolist. Fairy tales and folk tales. Some symbolists used traditional folk tales and fairy tales, and they actually drew their materials, such as characters or settings or other fictional elements, from them because uh, fairy tales have the element of imagination by default, so there was no need to add more imagination spice to the boiling pot of whatever they were writing. And aestheticism, there are actually two mini literary movements which sprang from symbolism. One of them is aestheticism. The main principle of aestheticism is that art should not be mixed with social, political, or moral teachings, something that was prevalent in the Victorian practice of art and literature. Their slogan was art for art's sake, not for preaching's or politics' sake. Art for art's sake, which is also fair. I like it personally. Aestheticism itself led to the birth of another kind of literature called the decadent literature. The term refers to the decline in the quality of art and literature following a period of greatness. They were actually mourning the past literature. The features are a fascination with perverse and morbid states, a search for novelty and sensation, a search for new thrills, um, a preoccupation with mysticism, I've mentioned it many times over, and a belief in the senselessness of human existence, something that was dominant in the later modern thought. And just a quick mention here, I don't want you to miss this. Symbolist movement was also seen in other forms of art, such as painting, music, and theater. Major symbolist poets, you can see their names here. The poets are all French poets, and in other genres such as novel and theater, we have two names. Um, Excuse my French. I have mentioned the names here so that you can search them if you want. But the major Symbolist poets were Stephen Mallarmé or Paul Verlaine, Paul Valery, or in other genres we have Carl Huysmans in a novelist actually, and Maurice Maeterlinck, a dramatist in theater. So let's see what we learned today. Symbolism was a reaction against rationalism and materialism of the age, and also against its contemporary movements of realism and naturalism. Elements of imagination and mystery were all vital in this movement. The movement focused on symbols and inner experiences of individuals, the individuals being writers and painters and musicians and poets, you know. Uh, Symbolist literature is dreamlike. It is dreamlike art, dreamlike literature. And you see these two pictures, they are really, you can see how symbolistic and how dreamlike they are. Um, you can search symbolist artwork and see more of them because it's good to take a look at symbolist painting to be able to understand its literature maybe better or more comprehensively, because when we say dreamlike, it's usually hard to imagine dreamlike literature. I mean, how is it going to be dreamlike? How is it going to be read? But when you see the paintings, when you see something with your eyes, I mean, straight in front of you, it's much easier to understand it. So I suggest you search symbolist artworks or paintings, and you just Google it and it will pop up for you. Take a look at them and then start reading the literature. That's it. This was a 15-minute review of the symbolist movement. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay tuned for more videos of the series. I'll cover the literary and artistic school of modernism next. There is so much to say about modernism, so I will probably stay on it for the next 2 weeks and then jump on to the next movement. Anyhow, make sure to check out the channel on Wednesdays for new videos. Take care and goodbye.